So hi everybody, I'm Pabla Ayala. I'm usually not one to be talking much about fashion. My focus is more on technology, but one of the very core properties of my business is storytelling, and I do this for a lot of different brands here in Miami, specifically focused on technology. So I just wanted to put together the essentials of how I tell stories for my clients in hopes that it may help you. And you know, if you guys are handling your communications or your outreach or your public relations for your brand or for a client's brand, hopefully you'll take something out of this. So what I typically do with any client is I meet with them and identify their goals. What are their objectives? This is absolutely at the core of all of your communications efforts, because you always want to make sure that whatever you're doing is constantly reinforcing their business objectives and their goals. Hold on. Oh, here we go. So, what are your clients' goals? Is it to increase user acquisition, to boost sales, attract talent, attract investor interest? All of these questions are absolutely essential and something that you should be asking all of your clients before you even begin to think of pitching or telling a story for your brand. So all of these different approaches are going to require, all of these different objectives are going to require a different approach. For example, this was one of my clients. All of last week came to a head when my client put on Smart City Startups, which was a 3-day conference, Wednesday through Friday of last week. And their goals were to sell tickets, first and foremost. Number 2 was to increase brand awareness. And the 3rd was to establish thought leadership. So the second step that I typically go through is find out who your target audience is. Who are you talking to? Who is your audience? So from this perspective, going back to the #1 core objective of selling tickets, this is a local event. It's a Miami event. So of course, we're going to look to the local media markets in order to spread the word. And this is exactly what I did for our clients. We reached out to all of these different entities like the Miami Herald, all of the local news channels, the South Florida Business Journal, and NBC6. So to increase brand awareness and thought leadership, a national approach was also necessary. It's not, to sell tickets only in the Miami market is imperative, but overall, it's not necessarily going to get them the recognition nationally that they need to tell their story. So in order to do this, this specific client is focused on startups that are changing cities in the future, that are green and that are helping to make cities smarter by combating climate change and the way everyday people live their lives in the city. So for that reason, it was imperative that I focused on individuals in the national spotlight that were focused on startups, renewable energy, climate change, and technology. So first and foremost, Google that shit. That is absolutely imperative. Google is your best friend. Google will tell you everything. You don't necessarily need to subscribe to a fancy database like Cision or any other type of database that charges you, $5,000 a year to join. Because typically, if you're doing this on a small enough scale, you can find everything you need on Google and the internet. These kind of social media outlets like Twitter, LinkedIn, About Me, Facebook, Medium, all of these are going to be essential tools to find and target exactly who you're looking to talk to target your audience. So for example, you can find any writer from Googling, from Twitter. You can contact them through Twitter. You can contact them on Facebook. You can contact them on LinkedIn. And odds are, if you do enough searching and if you don't want to pay that subscription to a database, you can find all of their information simply by doing a little bit of sleuthing and due diligence on the internet. You're going to become a bit of a stalker, but that's a good thing because you're going to be able to find out what interests them, what they're writing about, what they're talking about, what their audience wants to hear about just from their Twitter feed or from their Facebook profile. And that's very important to know. So you've got your information, you've got your target audience, you've got your objective. Now you're going to create your story. Now, in my opinion, press releases are dead. Press releases aren't going to, you're not going to send a press release through Business Wire, and especially for small businesses or smaller brands, writers aren't going to call you up and say, oh my God, let me write a story about you. That's completely unrealistic. If you're Coca-Cola or Apple, yes. If you're a smaller brand that's trying to get yourself known out there, it's not going to happen. So you have to think of a press release or a media alert as the press cheat sheet, which means that you have to include everything in there for a writer to be able to write a story without ever picking up the phone. So if you do this, then you may be able to send out this press release or this media alert and get some news stories without even having to call them back, if it's interesting enough. But as everybody knows, persistence pays off in public relations and marketing, so you always have to follow up. So just because your client thinks it's newsworthy doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be newsworthy. And you're going to tackle a local newspaper story in a different way that you would tackle a story on CNN or CNN Money or Fox News or TechCrunch. You're going to have to be ready to redefine your pitch and talk differently to specifically the writer that you're talking to. So you are going to want to personalize every pitch according to who you're talking to. And all of these writers are looking for different things. So you have to study the writers and what they're writing about. So that's where their Twitter feed, that's where Google comes in handy. You can do a news search on Google and see what they're talking about most recently and what they're focused on. And also don't be afraid to take a look at the outlet's media calendar of what they're going to be talking about when, so you can plan ahead of time if your story is relevant to that publication. And don't be afraid to get creative in your pitch. Some people are really scared about getting creative, but don't. Sometimes, and depending on who you're pitching to, if you're pitching to Refinery 29, Refinery is very image driven. So you're going to want to include images. You're going to want to include multimedia videos to specific publications because, believe it or not, these publications are looking for the easiest way to write your story up without having to invest too much time in it. And that goes back to the press release being the cheat sheet. If you have all of these links to videos and images that the writer can easily use, and if they don't have to Google and if they don't have to look up information on your client, the odds are that you're going to get a story much more easily printed than you would if you sent out an incomplete press release without the information. And the most important part that a lot of people forget is the subject line is the bouncer at the club. If you aren't creating an interesting subject line, you're not even going to get it to the door of the club. You're going to automatically get rejected. So don't be afraid to push the boundaries on the subject line of your emails. Make them interesting. Think of something that you would want to see in your inbox that would differentiate it. Instead of, new Miami fashion company launches. That's not really interesting. But if you create something super interesting like shoes with Raspberry Pi computers are debuting at Fashion Week this week, that's completely different and interesting that somebody might want to write about. So This is an example of how I changed the pitch to match the outlet that I wanted to get in front of. So smart city startups, they're very academically focused. They are on a different level. They like to talk about climate change, but at the same time, I got Deco Drive to do an entire piece on them. How did I do that? Because One Wheel is one of the products that was going to be at Smart City Startups. One Wheel is a one-wheel electronic skateboard that self-balances, and it's electronic and completely does the work for you. It's almost like a snowboard with one wheel. And this is obviously appealing to television outlets. So as you can imagine, One Wheel was my show pony for all of my local communications. So wherever anybody, when I wanted somebody to cover it, and I got One Wheel on WPLG and Deco Drive and tons of different, the New Times came to check it out, but it's because it's physically appealing, it's visual, especially for television. When you're pitching to television, you have to think in terms of visual. You're not going to get very far pitching a cloud service on television. It's not translatable, it's not visual. So Deco Drive came out and they did an entire piece about how this one-wheel skateboard is reimagining and changing the lives of people in cities and how we function in them, which is at the core of smart city startups. So by opening the conversation with One Wheel, creating the attraction, I was able to disseminate the message of smart city startups and the event. And you can see other rideable mobility vehicles like One Wheel at this event if you come. So the last one is enjoy the headline. Once you get the headline, make sure that you revel in it, show your clients, show them exactly how this is impacting their business and their bottom line. And these are just examples of some of the headlines that we got. Urge them to open up their Google Analytics when these hits come in and show them how their traction has changed just from your efforts of public relations, communications, and marketing outreach. And the last one is show your appreciation. And a lot of people forget this, and I can't urge this enough. I tell this to all of my clients. Once a piece comes out, make sure that you go to all of your social media, personal, your clients, post it, tag the writer, tag the producer, tag the news outlet that it came in. Put as many hashtags as are relevant to your news piece, because in the end we forget that these publications and these media outlets function as a business, and their core business is to get more viewer eyeballs onto their publications, onto their channels, onto their news sites in order to attract advertising dollars. And at the end, whenever you are able to attract the masses and you are able to attract more clicks, more eyeballs, more viewers onto your specific article that you helped publish or that you created the content for, the more valuable these producers and writers are going to see you. Because at the end of the day, all of these writers do have a meeting, just like everybody else, where all of the writers and their bosses gather, and they give a round of applause to the person who wrote an article that got the most views, the most shares, the most clicks, the most favorites, the most retweets, and that person gets a kudos. And then the person who wrote something that got the least clicks is going to get shit at the end of the day for that specific content. And you don't want to be the person that's on the shit end. You want to be the person that gets the kudos. So make sure that you do your part in order to help these writers that are helping you. And that's about it. Thank you.